The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal. My name is Joe Castello, and I'm your host, and we've got another great episode for you. On this edition of Hidden Horsepower, we're going to kick it back to not that long ago, one of the premier guests from our Engine Peformance Expo, and here to tell you who that guy is going to be, my co-host for this episode from Total Seal, Mr. Lake Speed Jr. Lake, I'm super excited about this one. We got our curiosity up a few weeks ago, and now we're going to throw it down.
Oh yeah, I am pumped up. Today's guest, he's going to be great. There's some real history there. In history I didn't even realize until last week of how closely connected me and him are, even though I didn't even know that until last week. It's kind of cool. So.
Wow. And that guest that everyone is excited about, Mr. John Callies, who has had a epic career from being a graduate as a mechanical engineer to working at General Motors in the Pontiac Motor Division, Callies Crankshafts, Morel lifters, just success after success after success. Let's bring him into the show, Mr. John Callies. John, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So we're obviously excited to have you here. You clearly made a huge impression last week. We had a lot of fun at the Engine Peformance Expo. What about you?
Oh, no. I mean, it was an absolute great time, and met, a lot of new people that I hadn't met. And, of course, one of the exciting things was giving Ed Pink his trophy. That was a cool deal. Really exciting.
Wow, and there's a great backstory on that one, too, right? Like, for the behind-the-scenes of the expo, they realized, like, man, we got to do something big for Mr. Pink. One of our best episodes, by the way, on Hidden Horsepower, in terms of the people who are sharing it. They want to hear Ed Pink. And for you to step in and step up, and Lake, you guys helped the folks at Rottler create an award. Like, what an amazing experience that was.
Well, it was super cool was that, well, the amazing thing, Joe, is, you're talking to Ed, and Ed's going on telling his story, and then completely unprompted, he starts talking about the Pontiac GTP program, and Ed's sitting there. He has no idea that John is part of the expo, sitting there listening to it, about to give him the award. So it was amazing. You couldn't have scripted it better, straight out of Hollywood.
Well, it was straight out of a bunch of gearheads. That was cool. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And I was thinking a little bit about some of the things we spoke about at your time at Pontiac, and I know we're going to talk about all of that, and we're going to delve in that your career spans beyond any one, like, engine builder, machinist, head of Pontiac Motorsports, like all of these things cross-pollinating, like the Venn diagram of your career touches all these different things, and you've had such exposure to so many interesting characters. So let's, I guess, start at the beginning, John, what everybody wants to know. How did this happen? How did you get involved in motorsports, the love of things mechanical? What caused that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. There was when I was 7 years old, I used to get this Carcraft magazine. It was about the quarter size of a magazine. And when you opened it, they had all kinds of how you do things, how you weld, how you do stuff. And I can remember reading it and going, gosh, I want to learn how to weld. Well, my dad was a first-generation German, and Dad came over at 7 years old to the States and then became a citizen and ended up being in teaching. And he worked at a vocational school when I was 7. And so I asked Dad if, he could help me get some torches. And, of course, Dad goes, well, it's very nice, but you get a job. And I go, get a job? Doing what? And he said, get a paper route. So I got a paper route and worked it for a year, saved $76 for my first set of Victor torches, And then Dad took me down to night school and got me with the welding guy, and so I got good training, and that's how I got started. And then from there, I think I was 12 years old and got my first car, which was a 37 Ford Coupe with a V8 60. And of course, I was living in California. And of course, I went down to the midget shops and I conned them out of a 2.2 manifold and some aluminum heads. And so I think I was 13 and built my first car. Of course, 16, you had to have a driver's license to drive. But anyway, when the folks were gone, I'd take the car out and have some fun. And then my high school car was a 28 Ford Roadster. They shortened up the bed on and had a Chrysler V8 Hemi in it with a 39 Ford transmission that I about blew up every week. So I was very good at changing gears. And, I just always have been involved in fabrication. And then fortunately went on to college. And then out of college, I got hired by Pontiac in engineering. And so then it took off. And for the first 13, 14 years, I had worked in plants and then got moved over to the proving grounds, and Bob Dorn, who was our chief engineer, decided he wanted to have a specialty, somebody doing the specialty vehicles, either for magazine cars or whatever, and I got chosen to do that, and then that led to the Indy pace car program, and that led to the motorsports program, and so then I spent, another 12 years doing motorsports, and we were doing both drag racing, road racing, boat racing, anything that had a Pontiac in it. I was involved in it, and my job was both engine, chassis, and aerodynamics. So it was a lot of work for one guy, and I had three other people that came with me that I had worked with me on the programs, but it was a really small group. And over the tenure at Pontiac, we made over close to 157 new racing parts that we made available through GMPD. So it was a pretty cool deal.
Wow. And Lake, I can't help but think about 13-year-old John over there wheeling and dealing at the midget shop. And that is genuine passion for whatever, right? Like you're throwing yourself into a situation and you're going to figure it out one way or another, Lake.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can see that passion is still in John. Just him talking last week, telling the story. I just remember him and Warren Johnson sitting there chatting. And him and Cass Choate chatting away about different things, and that same passion that I can kind of see that 13-year-old John Callies, because I saw it last week at the Engine Peformance Expo, was there on display as well.
And I think that's the thing. I said, once you're a motorhead, you're into it. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's always get that question when I'm driving one of the hot rods around. Someone says, well, when are you going to grow up? I said, I am growing up. I just love this stuff. Sorry. You don't like it, don't look.
Right.
That's how I feel about it. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's crazy. And, the nice thing is at the house here, at the home, I've got a nice home shop. And so, pretty much work out in the afternoon after work and come up for a couple hours in the evening and, putz around and build stuff. So I really get enjoyment out of that.
Well, you've come up with some major innovations over your career. We're going to speak about them, but I would love to timestamp your time at Pontiac, like when you got that first job as a mechanical engineer, just to know and think about some of the cars that were on the road at the time, like things that you were there for, touched on, worked on. our audience, they're all car guys. I'm a Pontiac guy also. Lake was like, dude, you need to. And just my dad had a 68 GTO Ram Air, and I grew up with that. We've got a 78 Trans Am. I still have it to this day. It's got a 455 Pontiac engine. And so when did you first get there? What were some of the road cars that you worked on prior to?
Well, it was 1968. And, you were not at the time. I was assigned on the working with a fellow on valve train, and so that's where I started. But obviously in '72 when the Super Duty came out, that was a big boost to Pontiac when we brought out the 455 Super Duty, and of course then as we had a ton of fun with that. And back then, Herb Fischel was kind of the unrecorded performance guy, and he and Tom Nell did a terrific job of, running on the radar, doing all kinds of cool stuff. So, that was fun. And then decided that we should go back into NASCAR racing. And so, I started down, and we, Rusty Wallace and Richard, we had 5 teams that we worked with. And, of course, you saw at that time, everything was was a Chevrolet small block with a Chevrolet head. But the problem was that the heads couldn't make 500 miles without turning into a sprinkler system. So that's when we developed the 867 head, and a fellow by the name of Mike Kennedy was the one that did the port work. He worked directly for us, and we used Brodex to produce the head, and that was a very successful program. And of course then the teams did all kinds of crazy things to the heads to get more power, and so when we first got approved with NASCAR, we had to give them a cylinder head. Well, all of a sudden, all the cylinder heads they were pulling off the cars weren't necessarily looked like the ones that we had first given. And so, we managed to escape by that. But both Ford and Chevy were making modifications to their heads every week. It was just part of the program. And, of course, now with all the templates and everything that NASCAR uses, that's pretty much impossible to do the stuff we did back then. But back then, we read between the lines and made what you need happen. And so that was kind of cool. Another thing that was kind of interesting, we found that it was a Pontiac Grand Prix we were running. And we found if the bumper was narrow by about 1.5 inches on the width, that we could pick up a bunch of aero. And so I produced about 300 bumpers, and we went that direction. Never got caught. It was kind of cool. And so it just, I don't know. It was fun. It wasn't just. It was every division was working hard to get an edge, and of course now with the new system that NASCAR uses, all that stuff's out the door, and the tolerances are way tighter. And I think it's amazing what these guys have done with the cars today of all divisions. It's unbelievable, how fast they've made these things. And of course now with cutting down the horsepower with what they're doing, it still amazes me the speeds they get. But that really comes from just all engineering. It turned from a good old boy sport into an engineering sport. And I mean, if you look at Penske or Hendricks or anybody, all those guys got 25, 26 engineers on board doing work every day. And so that's changed the sport. And of course, NASCAR has gotten smarter, and it's, I mean, now if you can find 1 horsepower, you're tickled to death. It's kind of crazy.
Oh yeah.
That's where you are, and so, then they, I don't know, this next generation is going to be interesting with the, independent rear and and all that stuff, and the electric ads. And so, the guys are going to have it tougher because now you're going to have a chassis that you can't touch, quote. Right. And based on what they're doing, I think it's going to be that way. And the whole idea is to try and get some of the costs for the owners out of the car costs. And, car costs is just crazy today what it costs to run these, or the engines, very expensive, So right. I think the most amazing thing to me is the guys will have an engine that they, have built and dynoed and goes in the car, and they go to a race and they bring it back and they'll pick up 3 or 4 horsepower at the end of 700 miles of testing and racing. And, certainly the ring program has just gone crazy of what these guys are doing, and sealing of the bores and all that stuff. I find fascinating what they're doing. It's just unbelievable. We would never think about that when I was back starting doing that stuff. So it's fun where the progression's going.
Lake, you know anything about that?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I may have met a guy or two along the way that had something to do with that. It's funny, listening to John tell that story. I walked over here to the corner of my office, and I'm looking at this picture, John, of my dad wearing the Nationwide Auto Parts uniform from 1985 when he drove for Bushmock and Dick Rahilly and those guys, and that was a Pontiac. And it wasn't a couple of years later that you came out with that aluminum Pontiac cylinder head. And I think I told you the story last week at the expo, is that that's one of the memories of me as a kid, teenager, late speed junior, Joe knows my middle name, running around the shop. I remember the day at Lake Speed Inc. when those cylinder heads arrived. It was like Christmas Day in the shop. All the guys in the shop all came back there and they uncrated that box. I remember the shipping label being Mena, Arkansas, and the guys were like, "Oh wow!" Now it just didn't come from Detroit. This is like super
right.
trick. And oh yeah, then they did all the work to them, and they got them on the dyno, and they ran them, and they didn't leak like a sprinkler, and the thing made a ton of horsepower. It's like, oh yeah, here we go. Now we're talking. It's great memories, some great days. Like you said.
Oh yeah.
Finding the narrower bumpers, all those things. It was that was the era, like you said, that there wasn't a lot of rules, and it was the good old boys, and everyone was trying to figure out the next angle. What was the next thing? It was innovation, because if you were behind today, okay, no big deal. Just go work on it. You can keep trying stuff. You find something, and then boom, you can jump ahead. You can get that advantage, whatever that advantage is for a while, and keep working it. So that, obviously, it's cool for me to hear you tell those stories and that progression, because obviously as a kid, I hear we're running an Oldsmobile and these Pontiac cylinder heads show up, and I'm scratching my head. Why do we have Pontiac cylinder heads?
Well, it was a cool deal, fun time, and you just were working yourself to death. But the whole idea was, how did you progress and win? And that was a fun. I never forget at Charlotte, Rusty was parked next to Junior, and so I was in the pits, and I look over at Junior, and he's got a set of Pontiac heads on there, and I just laughed. I thought that was so funny. The head Chevrolet guy had Pontiacs on it. That was a cool deal.
Of course.
So,
oh yeah.
And
so,
again,
question:
fun.
Were you still at Pontiac when Gibbs switched from Chevrolet to Pontiac when they went with Tony Stewart and Bobby Labonte?
I left in '96. That's what.
Okay, that's right. Okay, it's a little bit after that then. Okay.
Yeah. And And of course, that's, you know, I mean, what Gibbs and Toyota have done is another marvelous deal. You know, they really got after it, and they're a tough group to beat, and they win a lot. So, you know, you know, if you're all on the same page doing stuff, you got to admire the guys that come out on top. You know what I mean? And, you know, it's no different.
Well, that was a big part of it, was the Pontiac's involvement. You know, you know, when they hired Tony Stewart and they had Bobby, that's when the Gibbs family, just being the competitors that they are, said, okay, we're in this. If we're going to do it, we're going full bore. There's no second place. Obviously, the Hendricks and the Childresses of the world, and being the factory Pontiac team, they went all in, and that's where, you know, just going back to like you said, the fact that we've got short blocks that can run 1,300 race miles. You know, Doug Yates was saying that we can go 1,300 race miles on the short block, and it's still sealed up, still doing well. To me, where that really began starts back in 2000, 2001, when the Gibbs guys were with Pontiac, and we've got to win, and we got to do better. How are we going to figure this out? And they reached out to Lubrizol, and they started, you know, doing that development. They, you know, worked with Total Seal and said, okay, we're going to do these type of rings. We're going to do this kind of oil. We're going to do this type of bore finish. Now, they didn't have that package at the time, but that's where it began. That thought process and the very beginnings of looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, you remember
that whole process
when they went to all the lightweight lubes, and then they finally said we're not going to have a qualifying car and a running car and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, the thing is all those things cost a lot of money. You learn a lot, but it also causes the sanctioning body to kind of rein stuff in. You know, that's kind of their program, you know, because if you let everybody just have everything they want, we'd be the cost of Formula One, and nobody'd be in it, you know. So, you know, I got a handoff. I don't like a lot of the rules you hear, but overall, they've done a terrific job.
So on that point, John, and you know what's happening is, and I would imagine the listeners are having this experience as well, and we encourage you guys to subscribe to Hidden Horsepower and write a review on Apple Podcasts and share it with your friends, because this is great stuff. But you'll touch on a subject, you and Lake will just touch on a subject, and there's 5,000 questions that go by. Like, whoa, wait a second, they were there for that, right? Like, whoa, wait. And so I want to dig into a couple of things you said, and you can give some short answers. Like, for instance, you mentioned what's happening now, like the period of NASCAR engine building and team management when Rusty Wallace and Raymond Beadle and that team with the Pontiacs, and that you as the manufacturer were doing things. Yeah, I ran a limited number of bumpers that were narrower. So the manufacturer, you were very involved with, I don't want to call it skirting the rules, but compliance with the rules. Like, this is the rule. All right, what, we got to get a factory to make something to be in compliance? Do it. And you were all competing against each other. And as Pontiac, you didn't have the resources that some of the others did.
No, I think that was the thing. The Pontiac engineering team was a small group of guys compared to Chevrolet, which had a factor of 10 more. And so the group was small. They worked their tails off. And when they had extra projects to do, like this bumper thing, the guys would make it happen for me. I mean, it was a killer deal. You know, I mean, it was a fun time to me.
So are there 300 Grand Prix out there that someone is looking at it going, that bumper looks a little narrower than normal? What is up with that?
I'm sure they've all made it to the trash pile by now. But there were a lot of them. So,
all right.
You couldn't build two, you know, you had to build a bunch.
Well, exactly.
Anyway.
And your next comment I want to follow up on just the direction that modern NASCAR is going. As an old school mechanical engineer, to watch the transition from what you said, good old boys having fun, doing their best as they could with some help, to this extreme engineering angle to what will be the future, which is, as you said, like the sky's the limit technology-wise. They don't want you messing with the chassis. They don't want, wheel hubs instead of lugs. Like there's 1,000 little changes. Teams maybe will have, from what I understand, their plan is teams to have like 4 cars instead of 22, that kind of deal to save money. Are you on board with that strategy?
Well, it was really, I believe all that direction was being forced from the team owners from a cost standpoint. And, the thing is, IndyCar was successful going that direction, and it's a change. Far from me from saying it's wrong, because the alternative is if the costs keep going out of control, nobody can afford this sport. So, I'm happy to see it. And then obviously, in the roundy track world, short track racing doesn't get all these rules and regulations, and a lot of people can still afford to go do that, just like in drag racing. Not many people can afford a pro stock car, but you have a ton of people in the lower classes involved and doing neat stuff. I mean, to me, I don't care what kind of racing it is. I just enjoy it all. If it's got a motor, I'm good with it. So
got it.
That's just the way it is. And I think if you close your mind off or say, I don't like this or that's wrong, no, times change. And I can remember when we wouldn't have, if you started with 25 cars in a cup race, and you only had 15 finished because everybody else blew up. I mean, that's when I started. If you finished a race and everything went well, you were a happy camper. Well, today we just expect everybody to finish. We expect the engines to last, transmissions, rear axles, and all that has been developed. So, when they get this new chassis, there'll be some things that are going to be learned and changed. But, again, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think it's bad. I think we got to realize where we are, and the cost of running one of these teams is extreme. And sponsors this last year, everybody depends on sponsors, so that's gotten tougher and tougher. Did you look at the Chili Bowl with 350 cars showed up
Yes.
to qualify? That was unbelievable. So I
heard there was over 1,000 for the micro sprint race the week before.
Right. I mean, crazy. And so, of course, I was happy with, who won, happy with him. And of course, I was happy with Chase winning the championship. So, from our product, we had a great time. And,
Yes.
And I thought that Chili Bowl was a killer finish, and it was a neat race, No,
it's
fun deal.
It's become the start of the motorsports calendar each year, and a great job. Blake, dive in with a question here. We've got John for a few more minutes. I've got one that I'm going to hit him with at the end. A story that he started with me out there at our Engine Peformance Expo. I do want to remind everybody that audio is going to be out there, and John goes very in depth on the Fiero pace car project for the Indy 500. We're going to use this time for all the other stories, but if you want to find that one, you can definitely find it, Lake. Dive in with a question.
So, John, how did you get into the crankshaft in the parts business? Obviously, your history, your arc of going through Pontiac and involvement in all the different levels of motorsports. So what was the impetus to make that jump from the, we'll call it manufacturing of the car side to actually making engine parts?
Well, I was on my, we didn't have a president of Pontiac. He was called a vice president. And I was on my 6th vice president of convincing him why we should be in motorsports. And I was getting, this selling job, I'm getting tired of this, because for instance, if you go to Indy for the Nationals and you have people lined up down the pit side, both sides are just covered. They're in the seat that you could get. And I had one of these new guys that became vice president. I had him, he was a sales manager for Pontiac, and I had him down there. I had him on top of the tower, and he was looking over, and he goes, "John, why are we here?" And I go, "Because every ass out there drives a car. And if Pontiac does well, they're going to buy a Pontiac." And it was like he didn't even understand it. So at that point, I said, wait a minute, I got to do something else. So because I was so involved, I knew that crankshafts were always a shortage getting. And that's what caused me to go in the crankshaft business.
Wow.
Was trying to
supply and demand. He's
Yeah.
an economist too, Joe.
Yes, exactly. But then the mechanical engineering aspect comes in, and you start thinking heavily about what's going on with the crankshaft, and made some changes that were revolutionary and now mandatory for high-performance engines.
Yeah, and that was just part of looking at it, looking what they were doing. And some of the people out there remember that they used to double drill the second and fourth main, which was a disaster. So we had to tell everybody that was wrong. And then we changed how the oil came out of the connecting rods at what point. And then we did a double oiling system. Just, always trying to, can you do something better? Can you make it go longer? Can it work? And of course, there were everybody. We had real good competitors. In the crankshaft area, you had Crowder, you had Sonny Bryant, so you had a lot of great people, and I never minded competing against people in the U.S. I thought it was great because we all had similar wages, similar things we were fighting, and so that's great. It's how I feel. Never have problems, but when all of a sudden stuff starts coming in from overseas and they're trying to say it's the same product we have, that really isn't the truth. Now, of course, we keep training them, making it better, but that's how I just tried to make stuff that would improve every year with the crank business.
Very interesting. And then, launch and improve that business, sell that business, get involved in other people's businesses to help them. Your area of expertise is not just mechanical engineering, but business, but marketing. Like, you have been exposed to so many aspects. Like, your career path has touched all of these different areas that you had to be successful in. And frankly, even to this day with Morel lifters.
Yes. When I sold my portion of the crank company and went down to help Joe Lunati at Lunati Cams and Cranks, and then ended up merchandising that to Holly, and was out of work again. So then went into the Camcor business and worked that about 6 years, and then during that time hooked up with Ed Morel and we started the lifter business. So all that stuff, you've got to know where to go, how to market it, all that stuff. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that.
Amazing. Lake, dive in with a question.
It's just amazing. I'm just in awe. The work ethic, just seeing the passion of John and then how he applies that. I couldn't agree more with it. It's fair to have competition, on your own shores where everybody's doing the same thing. Because those other parts that come from other places, they're not the same. It may look the same, but we both know that the material and the quality and what goes into it isn't the same. And so couldn't agree with you more on that. We love to be American made and buy American wherever you can, because that's what keeps things going. And it's that arc over time of John's involvement in motorsports, and just to keep finding the next thing to work on, be it trying to make a car go faster or find the need in the market, where the market needs it, has a need for camcorders, or they have need for improved roller lifters, and keep moving forward that relentless effort and passion. I love it and respect it. So I can't thank John enough for him taking the time to come on the show and to be involved and to share that little bit of insight, because I think that's the biggest thing, is that curiosity that he has, and that just trying to figure it out. You see it just play out over and over again, be it at Pontiac or at Callies or at Morel or whatever he sets his mind to, he's going to figure it out, kind of like that car he had at the expo, didn't it? Wasn't it, Joe?
Yes. What is it, a Simca with the key on the back? That thing was spectacular.
So, and just a quick note, I kind of was thinking here, I was the first one to take Don Perdome's funny car into the wind tunnel.
Well, exactly. And I'm glad you say that, because I wanted to dive in more. Snake's got a book out. He speaks very highly of Pontiac and that era, because he was down and then he came back. Talk a little bit about Snake for the drag racers.
Well, Don was an absolutely phenomenal driver, and there were two drivers that I worked with, as both Don and Butch Leal in Pro Stock, and those guys, from the minute they left the line, they could tell you every foot of the track what the car was doing and what we were going to do next. I mean, they weren't just some racer. They were at the top of the game, and Don was just a really professional, super guy. And, his records, I think, still stand today that he's done, and just a marvelous person. And he has a terrific place in Southern California where he has a shop and kind of has a lot of his cars on display, but really, really a neat guy. And his wife, Lynn's terrific. Just good people, really good people.
Now, I can't help but think about his return at the Gator Nationals. I guess it's 87 at that point, and I wonder if you can weigh in. But Kenny Bernstein's got the Batmobile, right? Speaking of wind tunnels,
right,
where they just went extreme crazy in the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
What were you thinking, seeing what they did? And you guys had done some stuff as well, and obviously Snake won the race, and so that's what matters most. But that had to be extra rewarding.
Yeah, well, one of the things that was fun that we found in the wind tunnel is we put a sheet metal piece underneath the back, underneath the car, that started at the wing and radiused and came down in the back. And that was almost worth another 200 pounds of downforce in the rear. So, those small things turn out to be big things. And of course, then everybody else sees it and copy it. But, kind of fun being the first.
That is awesome. All right, so we're on the home stretch here, Lake. Feel free to have a final question. John, I just want to prep you. We're going to ask you to inspire the next generation with a little bit of advice. But I got to finish the story that we started as we were doing the Performance Expo, which was, you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of, car guys, but also racer guys, and that's they're not always the same. It's not always the same thing. Someone wants to sell a product that's a car. I think John DeLorean was there at Pontiac when you first got started, if I'm correct. I think about Bob Lutz, and you started to tell me the story of the front wheel drive Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, and we got separated. So if you don't mind,
okay,
that almost happened, and what a travesty. I feel sick thinking about it.
Well, what was funny is Lutz thought that going front wheel drive was that's the way to go. I mean, he truly in his heart felt that. So we were at a meeting of probably 100 engineers, and we had been providing what happens if you have a front wheel drive versus a rear wheel drive or an all wheel drive car. That was kind of where we were going, and we showed them that the front wheel drive, you can't feel the acceleration as a rear wheel drive car. And that's what we are all about, is somebody feeling, if you stand on the gas, you feel your back go to the end of the seat, and you feel this acceleration. And that the Firebird and Camaro were built for that purpose. And anyway, he overruled, and we had to build these front-wheel drive cars, but luckily at the last minute they got canceled, and we went back to the front-engine rear drive against his wishes. But engineering didn't want it, and we finally convinced them to the way it should go. So I think that was a fortunate thing. We really wanted an all-wheel drive car, but couldn't afford an all-wheel drive car at that time.
And how ahead of the time were you in that now you look at these German exotics or quasi, I'm talking about Audi, I'm talking about BMW, I'm talking about Mercedes. They make a lot of power, but they have all-wheel drive systems that let them get the power to the ground. I see it at the pit road drag racing we do at Homestead Miami Speedway. The all-wheel drive cars dominate the road cars because they've got grip. To think you guys were wanting that and working on that in the mid-'80s, that's incredible. And then the return to rear-wheel drive with the Camaros and the Mustangs, and people have realized now that rear-wheel drive is where the fun of driving comes from.
Oh, sure. And I mean, you just look at the new Vet. It's an incredible piece of engineering. I mean, the guys did an absolute fabulous job on that car. And to me, the all-wheel drive is a cool deal. It's just a very expensive thing if you say you want to produce a bunch of these things. And to me, when you look at a new Corvette, and I think with the base V8 that's 400 and something horsepower, it's like 65,000 sticker. So that you got to keep that in mind. That's pretty impressive. And certainly the LT engine is one of the most economical engines to build for a factory with the horsepower and fuel economy. So, the guys have done a great job. They really have. I mean, I'm blown away. I drove a new Corvette here about 5 months ago, and it's impressive,
Wow. And they're just getting started with that platform too. Like, I can't wait 5 years from now. Yeah. It's going to be crazy.
Oh, and you see they have their new high performance version coming out in August engine. And so that'll be a killer piece, but right now where you can run, with a standard package, 190 miles an hour, currently that's okay for a street model.
Yes.
Yeah.
Base model package, 190.
Right.
Lake, final question from you before we ask John for some advice for our next gen.
So going back to the Engine Peformance Expo and talking with Ed Pink, I actually asked Ed that night because we had a little bit of a technical issue there, and I said, what was your opinion, perspective? Was it easier or harder to take over a program that already existed or start one from scratch? And we were talking about the Pontiac program. He said that was actually, he feels, one of his major accomplishments because it was a turnaround deal. When you came to him with that program, it wasn't how you wanted it. And he had some work to do to get it turned around. And he said that was he felt a major accomplishment because doing a turnaround was harder. So I'd love to hear your side of that story a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, I went, Ed had known Ed for a long time, but he had a tremendous reputation. And at the time, we had one person doing a bunch of our engines, and it was just an overload for his shop. And the longevity of the parts of the engine wasn't where it needed to be. But there wasn't time at the current shop to do it. And I went to Ed and said, will you take it on? And Ed said yes. And, Ed performed all the things that Ed does and put the durability back in the package. And, he did a wonderful job, did a terrific job. So it's, a turnaround package. The one thing is, it wasn't that the engine didn't make good power. It was strictly a durability issue. And so I think it was much easier for Ed to take over and look at what somebody else had done and said, maybe we can tweak this, do this, help here. And, that was a easier program for Ed to do than starting from base one, and
you're refining.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And there's a different thing. I mean, all of us can go look at something and say, I might do that a little different. Well, that's way different than saying there's nothing there. What would you do? Two different processes, And so, we had put a lot of effort in that program because at my place in Mesa, Arizona, at our proving grounds, we designed the block, did the heads, did all the injection system, did all the dry sump work, and actually we used the Cosworth pumps because it was a proven part. And I used 2 pickup pumps on each side of the engine. So, you just see other people do other stuff, and you pick the right stuff, and so it's a fun project. I got older, greater, but it was a fun project. Yeah.
All right.
That's cool.
At the end of each episode, we ask that we lean on our guests here on Hidden Horsepower. I like to imagine, and it has been proven true, Lake can attest to this, that there are young people out there fresh out of school or, they want to get involved in the engine building trade, machining trade, or this world that you talked about. They love it and they want to get involved. What advice would you give to the next generation coming up to get ahead? We've heard, get to a shop and start sweeping the floors and do whatever you can for free. Your body of experience is a little bit different. I am very curious to hear what you would say to the next generation.
Well, I think the thing is, we saw 2 young men at the webinar last week that came from a technical school to work for Chris Straub, and it gave me excitement that we have young people wanting to get in the trade. And I think the one perfect thing, and I can't remember who said it, but the generation today is already grown up punching buttons and putting programs in. So it's a really easy thing for them to, move to the new machinery today. And there isn't any part of the performance area where we don't need machinists, fabricators, thinkers, drawers. I mean, it's wide open if you're interested in that. And I think there are people interested, and I hope they listen, and you just got to keep after it. You're going to go through several jobs. You just got to keep your passion ahead of you and just say, I'll just work my tail off the best I can, and it'll take care of itself. We need young people, period.
And there you have it. Wow, tremendous.
Yeah, well said.
Exactly, Lake. John, thank you for joining us here on Hidden Horsepower. Really appreciate it. Obviously, there's many more layers, and I think many more shows that we could do with you, delving into specifics of races and events and things that happen in projects. And that is what, your career has been so tremendous. We thank you for spending the time you did with us, and I appreciate it. Another great episode of Hidden Horsepower. Thank you.
Thank you guys both. Appreciate it.
And there he goes, Mr. John Callies. Lake, that was an impossible task for us. You can't take a career like that and pull an hour out of it. You just can't. But I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, it was amazing. We could have spent a week talking to this guy. He has, like you said, the little nuggets of the personalities, the individual races, the events. We've got to share the Fierro story as a kind of a bonus episode at some point in time, just because think about it, that's just one event, one car. And to think through his whole arc of from NASCAR to drag racing, to road racing, there's going to be tons of those little nuggets. So, yeah, I appreciate him sharing his time. Like you said, his passion, that's what came out. This guy's got a passion for just innovation and trying to make it better, and he's done that with everything he's done. So, again, can't thank him enough for taking the time to share with all the listeners his wisdom and insight.
Exactly. And what I would say in the old advice for the future generation, just look at the way he has approached every task that has come before him with creativity, and everybody uses outside of the box over and over again, but genuine outside of the box thinking, like tackling an issue, bringing in the aftermarket in, maybe where OE manufacturing couldn't do it or didn't have the time to do it or wouldn't do it, and overcoming all these situations and fundamentally transforming certain sports we're talking about, whether it be NASCAR with the cylinder heads or the Fiero project or aerodynamics and drag racing, like being involved in all of those things and being the guy that says, yes, we can do it, and maybe not even know how. But yeah, we'll do it. We can do it. And then doing it, as opposed to the person who says, we cannot do that. To me, that's what I take the most out of it.
Well, it's seeing, like he said, is reading between the lines. It's not saying, well, it says you can't do this. Okay, great. It says you can't do that. It didn't say I couldn't do this, and this.
Yeah.
It's seeing that ability to see what's not there and then bringing it to life. That's the key thing. And I mean, he said that that's what you want to do. You need to be able to have that courage to try and be adventurous. And that's one thing we heard over and over again at the Engine Peformance Expo was people said, don't be afraid to fail. Take chances. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't.
Exactly. Fail forward, the marketing people say. Whatever, you take that experience and whatever is next, it will be better because of the shot that you took now. And I love it. Speaking of which, we are back. We are Hidden Horsepower. We encourage you to subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, the TotalSeal.com website. What's going on at Total Seal, Lake?
Oh, man, this new year, getting everything kicked off, tons of business right now, everybody getting ready to go racing. And that's the cool thing to see is that people are ready to go racing. They're getting geared up for 2021. So, yeah, it's the phones are busy, a lot of parts getting made, which is great to see that the level of enthusiasm and confidence for this upcoming season and getting great feedback from the podcast. I talked to a guy yesterday. He's like, oh, yeah. Listen to the podcast. I want to try these. Let's do that. So it's cool to see it come full circle, which is what we want. Well, the whole reason for doing it, right, is we want to, inspire people that, yes, you can do this, that it's these things aren't just mystery hidden away. You can make more horsepower. You can make your program more reliable. You can do both. It's not an either or. It's a both and in terms of performance and durability. And it's great to see that feedback and see it's all starting to come together.
Absolutely. Keith Jones would normally say, before you start your project, give us a call first and have a conversation. For those people out there who are thinking, okay, I'm in, what should they do? Obviously, the new website, TotalSeal.com, but you guys really enjoy those phone conversations.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot you can learn. Obviously, you can go to TotalSeal.com. We've got the Request a Ring feature on there. You can send in your specs, and myself or Keith or Bobby or Kevin will look at it and get back to you. That's the thing. It's not a computer that responds to us. It's one of us. We all look at them and see them and respond back. So that's a great way to initiate the conversation because all the information we're going to want to know is already kind of captured in that form. Or just if you're more free form, you don't have something in mind yet, then give us a call. 623-587-7400. Give us a call. Tell us about what you're trying to achieve because, that's the biggest thing is it's what you're trying to achieve is going to dictate what the technology is going to be. We've got all kinds of great technology from, gas-ported rings to gapless rings. Be that conventional. We got total conform. We can do anything from a 2.5-inch bore to a 5.5-inch bore. You can go from steel to ductile moly. There's all these things we can do, but there's not a best technology. It's about determining what's the right technology to achieve the goals of your application. And that's where, the 100+ years of combined experience of the tech guys at Total Seal can help you out. Is it begin there? What are you trying to do? What's the mission? Now we'll help you figure out a way to achieve those objectives.
And there you have it. Lake, thank you so much. Great job as usual.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate you doing this for us.
He's Lake Speed Jr. I'm Joe Castello. You can follow me on Twitter at WFO Joe, WFO Radio, my other podcast, where we're talking drag racing all the time. That's going to do it for this episode. The archive is loaded. Big thanks to Mr. John Callies, Mr. Lake Speed, and we'll see you next time right here on Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal.